Now there's another extremely useful element that you can insert inside of Dreamweaver, and that is the Spry elements. What the Spry elements allow you to do is to plug in some pre-manufactured JavaScript code. And basically, Dreamweaver will do all the heavy lifting for you. You don't even have to know any JavaScript whatsoever to be able to use some Spry elements. All you really probably want to be doing with them is styling them with some CSS. And since we've gone over some CSS, I'll show you exactly how we can go about doing that. So to begin with, what I'd like you to do is to just change some of the definitions inside your sites for Chapter 10. If you go to Manage Sites, and we're just going to edit Chapter 10. We're not going to create a new one, so just double click it, and when you do, I want you to point to your local site folder. If you click on Browse for Folder, you'll notice that we're still inside the Start menu for Chapter 10, but if you go back to Chapter 10, you'll see that in here there's a folder called Spry. If I ask you to click on Spry, you'll see that there's a Start and a Finished version. So let's go to the Start. Now, what I'm going to be using for this, if you choose this and save it, click OK, and then say Done. Once we open this up, you'll see that what I am in fact using is one of our older versions of the websites that we've been working on. And if we go to Live View, you might remember this from an earlier chapter. And essentially, you can see that I've removed the navigation element right here. Now, I've also removed from the CSS a number of rules that we were using for the nav. Now I still have nav here with a background color, although I could even get rid of that. But what is important is the clear fix that we were using. If you don't remember what the clear fix is, you might want to go back and review that in the previous chapter where we discussed it. So we're going to keep this in place because these floating elements here will not really work properly without this clear fix that I had created earlier. All right, so what can we do with Spry elements, and exactly what are Spry elements? Well, as I show you how to use them, you'll get a better understanding of what they do. But the first glimpse that we can take at Spry elements will be within the Insert menus. I'm just going to collapse my CSS and my Files menu, and let's just open up our Insert menu. If we exit from Live View, you can see that certainly we have our common inserts and all the other ones, but there is one in here called Spry. And what it'll show you is a number of different Spry elements that you can go about inserting. Now, a lot of these elements will work with external programming like the data set and other things here that are probably beyond the scope of this video tutorial. However, the last few elements in here are quite useful. I'm not going to go through all of them with you, but I will show you probably the most common one, which is the Spry menu bar. And what the Spry menu bar does is it'll allow you to insert a menu system much like we had created ourselves. But unlike the one that we had created in both of our website examples, this one will have drop-down menus. In other words, if you have a section of your menu item that will need subsections visible, this is a really easy way of inserting them inside of your code. So the Spry menu bar. Now the tabbed panels are something that's really useful too. The Spry accordion is a nice useful element, and so too is the collapsible panel and the Spry tooltip. However, the Spry menu bar is probably the most useful and the one that you'll see most often, and that's the reason why I'm showing it to you. So in order to begin with this, what we would need to do is to go to our code view, and let's navigate after the header section but before the sections. Remember, we had 3 sections where we had some fonts showing, and I want to insert a menu system right here. So in other words, right after our header but before each of these individual sections that we have here. So I'll go to my code view, make sure live view is turned off, and here in the code view, right after the header, before the section, I want you to click and introduce the Spry menu bar. Now when you do that, it's going to be asking you whether or not you want to have a horizontal drop-down menu or in this case, a vertical drop-down menu. However, the horizontal is exactly what we want to be using, so we'll choose horizontal and click OK. Now when you do that, you'll notice a few things. Number one, it's not placed in a div or in a section or a header or any other element. It's just using an unordered list. And we're pretty familiar with unordered lists in menu items. And this one uses a list item here. But notice, inside of those list items, there's actually an unordered list. So there's a nested unordered list within the list items themselves. And you can see that anything that's going to have submenus will do just that. Okay, before we get into styling this and actually making these list items say what we want them to, let's go to our design view and let's hit the live view and see what's going on. Now, if you can't really see that all that well, let's preview this inside of the browser. So, when we do this, there's going to be an important thing that's going to happen. First of all, let's look at our Spry menu start file that we have here. There's nothing going on in here except some web fonts and a CSS and the Spry start file that I asked you to open. Now look what happens when we save not only the file that we're working with, but any external files. So if I say preview in any browser, whichever one you want, we will save the changes to the start menu. Notice here it says this page uses an object or behavior that requires supporting files. So check this out. What is going to make this Spry menu work is a Spry menu bar.js file, a JavaScript file. Spry menu bar down GIF and a down hover GIF. These are little GIFs that if you wanted to, you could change the way they look. In other words, you see these little arrows that we have here? Those are the ones that I'm talking about, the down and the down hover. There's also a CSS file that's devoted specifically to the Spry menu bar, nothing else. And that's kind of useful because if you need to make adjustments to your CSS, this is a really good way to sort of localize that CSS so we know it's only for the Spry menu. And of course, there's a couple of other GIFs in here that are used in making this thing work. So I'm going to say OK, and that's going to preview our file in the browser. And as you can see here, it's a little messed up. What you'll notice is that any of the floating elements that we had have kind of come up to this point underneath it. And that's okay. I kept the clearfix class that we had created in the past, and we're going to use that again. But take a look. Here in the Spry menu item, you can see that the first item has a little arrow here, which indicates that there's a drop-down menu. I'll show you how to customize this in a second, but nevertheless, this one does not. This one, as you can see by the arrow, does, but notice this. Within that submenu, there's even more submenus. See the first item here, item 3.1, happens to have some items here as well. It's really quite nice. And the item here is useful as well. This only has one and nothing in the submenu. Okay, well now that we know what it looks like, let's go back to Dreamweaver and we can see how we can fix this. So I'll leave this open, but we'll come back and preview this in a second. So here we are back in Dreamweaver, and I'm just going to collapse this so you can see this a little bit better. And what I want to be doing is selecting the Spry menu item that we have here and applying the clearfix class to it. So let's go to our code view. And you can see that here is the Spry menu. UL, unordered list, ID, menu bar 1, class, menu bar horizontal. Now it has a class, but take a look at this. Dreamweaver now supports the ability of applying multiple classes to your work. And that's something that it was not able to do in the past. Although you could always do this just by typing it in yourself in the code view. But as you can see, if I were to select this item here, and you would see it there, UL unordered list with the ID of menu bar 1 and the class of menu bar horizontal. If I were to click on this and right click on it, you could see set class. Well, it's the clearfix class that I also want to set to this, not removing the original one that we had, but actually adding a second one. Well, look at this. Now we can apply multiple classes inside of Dreamweaver. If I click on this, check it out. We can say, click to specify multiple classes. Well, we want this one, but we also want to have the clearfix. So you see how they're both checked off. Then if I click OK, you'll notice that here in the class we now have two, menu bar horizontal, and then there's a space with just the clear fix that we have. So let's take a look at what this looks like in our design view. Beautiful. Because we applied the clear fix to the menu, it's pushed the floating elements underneath it and has made it look just the way we want it to. If we preview this in Safari and we save our file, you'll see that when we return to the browser, now we have our drop-down menu in place and all the other elements that we want to work with as well. So come back in the next video, and when we do, I'll show you how we can change the text that's written inside of these things, as well as changing a little bit of the CSS that we're going to be dealing with.